Even said, he's like, I'm sorry, I got the plate right. I'm like, yeah, as long as she can see it. All right, we'll get started since it's just a few minutes after 5. I think a couple people might filter in that are still outside chatting, but we don't want to delay too long. So welcome. When I put my hat on, I turn into Ned. When I have the hat off, my name is actually Brian in real life. I'm the visitor experience manager here at our Fort Clinton Welcome Center. So if you haven't been, welcome to our center. And I am really excited about our talk tonight. At an Earth Day event for the Erie MetroParks, Mike came up and started talking to me, and I nerd out about a lot of things, so I got really excited because I don't know a lot about moths, and you do. So, and he was so excited about it. I was like, I really want to learn about moths. So we scheduled this. It actually wasn't part of the original year plan, but I'm really happy about it. And I learned that this is Moth Week, which I didn't know about. So I'm thinking we're all going to learn quite a bit tonight. For those of you watching us on Facebook or Instagram, feel free to post questions, and we will monitor those and see if we can get them answered for you. So I hope everyone enjoys, and I'll turn it over.
All right, so I want to give a huge shout out first. I would love to say that this was my idea, but my coworker Sue Daniel, she's sitting in the back there, it was her idea. Actually, she's like, go talk to him, go now. So it was a win for me because I love talking about bugs, I love talking about wildlife. I love talking about nature and ways that we can conserve our natural land. So as you kind of heard, I'm a naturalist at Erie MetroParks, so 1 county over, and I've been there for about 7.5 years, depending on who you ask. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to go through the life cycle, we're going to go through some really cool species of moths, but my goal always is to, 1, change your mind about how you feel about moths. Number 2 is to make you understand that how connected they are to everything else in the environment and how important they are in the ecological role that they play in our lives and in all the things that we do. Because people don't really think about moths that way. Most of the time when you guys think of moths, you probably think of them this way. Just like this. Moths that eat your clothes, or moths that eat your stored grain, or ones that are in your garden, eating your tomato plants and things like that. So this is how most of us envision moths, is in a terrible way, right? The truth is that moth right there that you see eating the clothes, they don't eat clothes as an adult. It's the caterpillars that eat the shirt material. And then meal moths, which is what you would see in your grain or your dog food and stuff like that, they can kind of mess that up a little bit and get it all gunky. And then obviously the hornworm here, that's going to eat your tomatoes and any of your nightshade plants that you got. But we have natural predators that can help out with those guys too. So, before we go any further, is anybody here afraid of moths? Are good, I like that. Because sometimes people get a little freaked out. And when you look at this little caterpillar, the first thing you see is he's terrifying, right? So I'm going to step over here so you can see this for just a second. So his 6 little legs are right here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are all little suction cups so he can stay attached to that plant. This little, what looks like it's going to stab you, harmless, it's soft. It's just kind of a defense mechanism to keep predators away from them so that they don't get predated on or eaten really, really fast. It's important for them to kind of have this defense because they kind of stick out like a sore thumb when they're sitting there on the plant and they've eaten all the leaves and all the tomato off of there. It's easy pickings for a bird. So, what is a moth and how do we kind of differentiate? So moth is an insect, 6 legs, 3 body parts, head, thorax, abdomen. Pretty simple. The big thing that we're going to talk about, number 1, is the antenna. So when you look at a butterfly, they have what would be called a club and ball antenna. So club here, and then a ball at the very, very end. And I forgot that I have a pointer, so I don't need to get up there and show you guys. And then when you look at a moth antenna, like this one, Most of them are feathered, so I always like to bring these turkey feathers to show you guys kind of what we're talking about here. So, all of our moth friends have a feathered antenna, and they look different between every species. I'm going to pass something around for you guys. So when you look at the giant silkworms, so all the large moths you see in this little display case here, not the teeny tiny ones, they are the ones with the massive antenna. And they can easily be seen, and they look like feathers, and they're very, very kind of easy to spot and differentiate. Some of our smaller ones, I'm going to go back here real quick, just real fast to kind of show you, like on this little guy, super teeny tiny, you can't even see that feather, right? But he still has a feathered antenna, it just operates a little different than these big ones that look like aphids to try to get all the senses that they can, okay? So, their body makeup is very similar to a butterfly, they're cousins, so they belong to the family of Lepidoptera, and when we talk about Lepidoptera, that word is a Greek word, and it just means scaled wing. So if you were to look at a moth or a butterfly under a microscope, under their wing, you would see just a series of scales kind of laying over top of each other, kind of spread out there a little bit. But that's how they get that name, the scaled wing. Some of our moth friends kind of have little furry bodies, like this little rosy maple moth right here. Has this nice little fuzzy body. It's not hair, they're just scales. They're just modified, a little more elongated than the ones that would be on their wings. Okay? So, how do you tell the difference between a moth and a butterfly if you see it only for a few seconds? Okay? So, we already talked about these antennae, these big feathery antennae, these slender antennae here. Most of our butterflies have bright, beautiful colors. So when you think of a monarch, or you think of a viceroy, or you think of tiger swallowtail, those big ones, they have nice, big, bright orange, yellow, vibrant colors, make them easy to spot. Most of our butterflies, when they close their wings, that's when they have their camouflage kind of in, like right here. So when you see like the buckeye and a few other species, when they close their wings, it looks completely different on one side. Another really important thing, easy way to tell if it's a butterfly and a moth, butterflies usually rest with their wings closed, up top, closed like that. And our butterfly friends, or our moth friends, always lay with them open, for the most part. There's always people who like to break the rules, like Jay Yoakum, and a few other people. But it makes it really easy to kind of differentiate which moth species, which is a moth and which is a butterfly. So that is very helpful. And the reason for this is most of our moth friends, all their camouflage is on their open wings. Real quick, we'll talk about their life cycle. I'm going to pass a couple other things around too. So pretty basic life cycle: egg, larva, pupa, adult. Okay? So most of our adult moths will lay their eggs on the underside of a leaf, underside of a tree, and some bark, maybe in the leaf litter. But for the most part, laying it on some type of vegetation. Usually it will hatch and then begin to immediately, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to eat its egg casing. It's going to give it a lot of extra nutrients so that it can kind of grow quick at first, rapidly. And then as they start to grow, they'll start to eat the plant material that they are on usually, or that's in the vicinity. And then they'll eat like pigs. We've all heard of the very hungry caterpillar, right? They just kept eating. They're not eating cake, they're not eating cheese, they're eating usually a specific type of plant or multiple different types of plants. Pupa stage, so this is another place where moths and butterflies differ, okay? So our moth friends all have, they either make a cocoon or they just go into their pupa dormant stage. So, or a naked pupa is what we would call it. Okay? So, and what I mean by that is when you think of a cocoon, you think of one like this, right? So this is the Cecropia. So our largest species of moth in Ohio. It's this little guy right here on this book. Okay? Largest species. Okay? Now, if you look at this, when it comes by, there's no moth in here. He already left. She already left. And the one thing you're going to notice is there's no exit hole. And that's a little strange. Does anybody have a guess as to why they don't have an exit hole? It's because during their pupa stage, they are soft, very, very soft. So what happens is when he's ready to come out of there in usually early summer, they squeeze out the top, and their body is basically really, really soft. So they squeeze out, and then their wings will spread and then they'll start to dry out as the blood kind of pumps out through the rest of their body. Okay? And then the life cycle starts all over again. Okay? So here's an example of your naked pupa. So some of our species of moths will just go into the naked pupa form and just sit in the soil or sit in the leaf litter. But for the most part, most of our friends cocoon. So like this. Just like that. And they use silk, they use plant material, and a variety of different things. So for this one right here, so this is an IO. I'm going to bring this one around because it's super delicate. This is an IO chrysalis. I'm sorry, cocoon. Butterflies are our chrysalis friends. So it's hard to believe that a teeny tiny, well, not a teeny tiny moth, it's actually a pretty large moth, squoze its body out of there. So that one that's getting passed around, the Cecropia, so that is our largest moth at about 5.5 inches. So usually about the size of your hand or a little bigger. So it squoze its little body out of there. Doesn't even look like it. It's a little honeycomb. And most of the time we wouldn't even notice these things. We wouldn't even see them sitting on the ground. We wouldn't see them kind of hanging on a tree where you would find these ones like that. That one that's getting passed around the room, I was teaching a class of 3rd graders, and this little girl points from across the trail and she goes, "Mike, there's something right there." I'm here. And the branch is here, next to my head. And I'm looking around and I can't find it. And finally she walks over and she goes, "It's right here." And she touches it, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I completely missed it." So we can walk right past them and not even see them. That's what they're designed to do, to kind of be hiding in plain sight. Okay? So life cycle is pretty simple. Once the adult finds a mate, and that's usually pretty quick. So most of our moths, not all, but most, only have as an adult, about a 1 to 3 week life. Okay? So their job as adults is to mate, and then lay their eggs, so their offspring can continue to help pollinate, continue to help do a lot of other things. Now there are species that do live a little bit longer than that, but it really just depends on the species. Here's the scary thing. So when you think of moths and you think of butterflies, only about 1% of their eggs make it to adulthood. So all the caterpillars are predated on, whether it's by birds, by raccoons, possums, anything like that. They're going to snack on these little delicious, juicy insects that they can find, but only 1%. And most of our moths lay about 50 to 60 eggs. So that's not very many making it to adulthood. Okay? So they have enough pressures on them from us as humans with light pollution and pesticide and herbicide. They don't need any more struggle. Okay? So we're just going to hit you with some quick facts real fast. Moths outnumber butterflies 9 to 1. Okay? So when I tell you that, that's a lot. So they're doing way more pollination, moths are, way more. Everybody always thinks butterflies are, which they are doing an exceptional job at pollinating. But when you outnumber, in terms of entire species, 9 to 1, they have to be doing more work. Okay? Number 2, we have some day moths. We have diurnal moths. There's a whole genus of moths called the flower moths that prefer to fly during the day and don't really fly at night. Size difference. So, as you heard, the Cecropia and the Polyphemus are our largest, about the size of your hand, but they can be as small as a grain of rice. Okay? So some of our moths, when I either look at them on a sheet or if I'm observing them, I can't even identify them because they're way too small. I need like a macro camera to really get in there. Too expensive. Okay? And when we talked about those antennae, this is really cool. They can really, really use those antennae well. So that first kind of little box that I passed around, you saw the antenna there. We can tell the difference between males and females with antennae. Males have gigantic antennae compared to females. So females usually have short, stubby ones because they don't need to do a lot of work. The man's got to do all the work in the moth world. Okay? He has to find the female, and that takes a lot of work, sometimes upwards of 3 miles for some of them. So these antennae can sense the pheromones of the female upwards of 3 miles away. So that means if we're here and there's a nice little park about 1.5 miles away, and I were to drop a Polyphemus female here, a male could come here. I've even had it to where this cage right here with IO moths, if I put a female in here, usually in the evening, I'll get 2 or 3 males laying on the cage because they can smell her. And they're interested in what she's doing because they want to share their genes with her so they can go on and kind of help their populations. Okay? One species of tiger moth, and this is not where we live, it's in western US, actually can do what's called jamming. So what they do is, anybody know how a bat kind of moves through the air and how they find food? They use echolocation, right? So with them using echolocation, this moth has developed a new kind of little trick that where it can send out its own clicks and snaps up into the air, and it confuses the bat so he can't catch that moth. Okay? So that's pretty interesting and really cool for them. And then some moths migrate. Somebody asked that when we started. Some of our moth friends migrate. Some upwards of 50 plus miles. When you think about the monarch butterfly, that butterfly travels 3,000 plus miles, and these little guys 50, 60, some up to 100. And we'll talk about one that I've been chasing for a long time at the end. So, why are moths so important? As I mentioned earlier, they're a huge food source for a variety of animals during their life cycle. Forgot space there. Moths are extremely diverse, with over 160,000 species worldwide and over just 3,000 in Ohio. And I'm up to 900 species in Ohio. So, I'm getting closer. They help various species of plants through pollination, including nocturnal flowers. So we do have a few species of flowers that only kind of bloom in the evenings. So butterfly friends are fine at night, so our moth friends got to come in and pull the night shift. They are also nutrient recyclers. So caterpillars play a big role in our environment, whether we believe it or not. As I mentioned earlier, they're feeding a lot of things, but we consider them in the biological world as a shredder. So they're breaking up little pieces of leaves, helping to kind of prune trees naturally. And then what happens is some of that material drops to the ground, and our decomposers and detritivores, worms, grubs, things on the ground, are consistently helping to break that stuff down further, making it into soil, getting that nutrient cycle back into the ground. Okay? And then they're the meteorologists of the environment, believe it or not. Moths are extremely sensitive. I talked to a few of you before we started, because you asked if I had moths. I intended to bring in the big good ones, the juicy ones that everybody wants to see, the silk moths. But the issue is if it's cool at night, they're not as active. So the last couple of nights it's been a little cooler, so I haven't gotten a lot of the big moths, but I still have a few kind of come through. So I've been doing this for a really long time. And I'll kind of just brush on how I got into this. So when I started at the MetroParks, somebody was like, Mike, you should do a moth program. I was like, all right, I can do that, not a problem. No big deal, I'll give it a try. So I lived in Vermilion at the time, and I was in an apartment complex. And everybody there thought I was very creepy and weird when I was out till 2 or 3 in the morning looking at bugs on the poles and in the grass. They called the cops on me a couple times. It's okay, but we were fine. And then I really didn't realize how it was going to pick up. I found one really cool species, and then it just kept going. And if you ask any of my coworkers, they're like, sometimes it's annoying how much he talks about moths. So what I found in the MetroParks so far, just the MetroParks, 734 species as of last night. I found a new species last night on one of my moth hikes. 2 endangered, 4 threatened, or vulnerable moth species. So that's huge. And when I'm doing this, there's all kinds of other cool stuff too. So I found 54 species of spider and 148 species of other insects. I usually brush over a lot of the other insects because my focus is the moths. So sometimes I'll shoo some, if I know what it is and I know I don't need to report it, I'll shoo them off. But mostly I'm there for the moths. But we've uncovered a lot of really cool stuff that not only is good for our park district, but it's good for the environment, and it can help our natural resource team kind of decide what we're going to do with things in the future. How do I do it? How am I doing this? All right, so it's pretty simple. Anybody in this room can do this at any time. All you got to do is go pick yourself up a black light, and either a painter's tarp that's white, or a sheet, or even a bath towel works as well. You'll see some pictures of an old bath towel that I use from time to time. But it's pretty simple. Hang the light up, turn it on right about 9:30, and just wait. Depending on how long you want to wait, as the longer you wait, the bigger and better the moths get. So what happens is, which we'll talk about this in a minute, is moths are pretty attracted to most types of light. I specifically use a black light because black light's a little bit easier. They can see it on a different spectrum. They can see different colors than we can. And there is a light source that's a little better, mercury vapor. But I try not to use that because they get very hot, and I'm always afraid of knocking it over and setting the woods on fire. And I don't want to do that, so we just stick to our black lights here. And it's very lucrative, believe it or not. Obviously, I found over 700 species and tons of other insects. I also make a buffet for spiders. As soon as they see me setting up, they start spinning webs, and they're like, oh, it's going to be free food for us. Thanks, Mike. Another way that I do this is baiting. Believe it or not, there are some species of moth, not all, some lack mouth parts altogether as adults. They literally just live for a week to breed, and that's it. But some of them are attracted to bait. And believe it or not, does anybody have a guess as to what their favorite drink is?
Beer banana mix.
Beer, that's right. Beer is their favorite drink. And here's why. When you create alcohol, you make sugar, and yeast combines, and it smells very similar to their natural food, which is rotting fruit, usually. So that one here, the little jar you see, that's a wine line, and that's about 300 armyworm moths on that line right there in my backyard. So they will kind of come to that very easily, and then you get some other ones like this big underwing moth here that's there sipping nectar, or well, not nectar, he's sipping moth bait, and then this is a horrid zale that's sipping moth bait off of there as well. So you can attract a few different ones that you wouldn't get to your lights normally by baiting. Okay? And I flipped
How
my.
long do you have to wait for the beer to be baitable?
So I always use stale beer. So if you know somebody who has stale beer or has a stale beer, or just chuck it outside, that's an easy way to do it. And then I take that and I mix it with molasses and then the banana, mash it all together, and then I set it outside for 2 days, 2 hot days.
Ooh,
Okay? The smell alone will make you not want to drink it. So don't even think about it. It's not worth it. My daughter made me this cool little label. So she thinks it's cool that I make moth bait every year. It's like a whole family thing now. But for the most part, bait works really well, and it gets a few different species that you wouldn't really see. So, why are moths attracted to UV light and to bait? As I mentioned already, it mimics the natural fruit source for the bait there. But when we talk about moths and how they're attracted to light, so there is some argument here in the science world. Research is continuously ongoing, and Europe does a little bit better of a job in terms of moth research than we do. And they had a wonderful biologist recently who came out with a new theory within the last 5 years about transverse orientation. So basically, what they have predicted and kind of tested is that moths will fly naturally with their back to the light, okay? Because they are looking for a more natural light source. Some of our fake light sources are a little stronger and a little more kind of centralized. So they get there, and then they start to fly with their back to it, and they keep it there. And then once they keep flying, they don't have anywhere to land. So depending on the way the light is distributed, if it's distributed straight up into the air, that's a huge issue. Because not only is it creating sky glow for a lot of other wildlife, but these guys don't really have a place to stop. So what happens is the moths will just continuously fly around these lights, and parking lot lights and things like that, until they get exhausted. And then they just die. They just collapse from exhaustion. So one way for us to kind of combat that is to start working on better ways to manage our light usage. And then phototaxon, that's another way. So some things don't like light at all. So when you think of a cockroach, what happens when you pull something off and you see a cockroach? They scurry because they don't want to see the light. But with these phototaxons, the moths are actually, some people believe that they're attracted to the light and it brings them in, okay? Which in some cases that is true, but most of the time it's heat that brings them in. Because they're, as I mentioned earlier, they are sensitive to environmental changes, and it allows them to kind of get a little bit of heat source. Often I'll even find on some of my lights, that they'll just sit up near the bulb and just kind of hang out where it's nice and warm. So, types of moths. Now this is where it gets crazy, because I would love to tell you that I could name every single moth that I've seen, but that's not true. It can be very complicated, and some species look almost identical to each other. There's little teeny tiny differences, and then some need a gene test for us to determine whether it's one species or the other. We don't have the money for that, or the time. So there's 65 to 70 moth families in Ohio. So when you think of a family of moths, so the silk moths, the giant ones, which is in the box that I showed you over here. So all of our silk moths are going to be our large ones, so our big ones, like the Luna moth, the Polyphemus, Regal, Imperial. Those are all your big ones. And then they start to get smaller. You start to think of sphinx moths, which is one that I've mentioned already, and also one that we have here. So I have a Virginia creeper sphinx, appropriately named for their favorite food, which is Virginia creeper. It's a native plant. And these little guys are interesting for a few reasons. Number one, so when you look at a sphinx moth, they always turn their tail up, or the back end of their abdomen there. It's turned up. They also get that name from their caterpillars too, which their caterpillars kind of sit in that little sphinx-like stance that you see. He's the biggest one I got today. And as I mentioned earlier, their size difference ranges astronomically, from the size of our hand all the way down to our micro moths, which are teeny, teeny tiny. For example, this one right here, I didn't take this picture, but this is, I think, like 100 times zoom with a macro camera. I think they said like a quarter of a grain of rice was the size of this moth species. So that's pretty small. And you wouldn't be able to pick that up even with the naked eye. Some biologist at some point was netting, saw this little black smudge and went, we're putting that under the microscope and see what that is. So their diversity is astonishing, and I think we'll only find out more about them in time. So if you're ever looking at moths, if it's a big one, just assume it might be a silk moth. Some other ones that we have that are pretty kind of showy and beautiful. When you think of the IO, the IO moth is a very easy moth to identify. It's got some nice bright yellow color, well, at least the males do. This is a sexually dimorphic species, meaning we can tell the difference between males and females pretty easy. Females look kind of a brownish pink color, and the males have a nice big bright yellow color to them. Yes?
Now, on the left side, you have Cecropia on the top, and then go down. The fourth is Polyphemus.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the correct size? Sure?
No. This is just a kind of picture. I think originally in the photo it was, but for the Polyphemus, this is about the size right here.
Cecropia?
I would say about an inch to an inch and a half larger. They're pretty close in size, believe it or not. Yes, pass that around too. And then there are some species, the only one that's not, this, I don't know how this one snuck in here on this diagram, but that one is not one that's native to Ohio. That's Mexico, Arizona. But as you can see, that looks like a butterfly, doesn't it? So there have even been some diversity in butterflies to start to kind of mimic moths. So it's been like a back and forth. Moths are older than butterflies. They kind of have figured out that moths evolved before butterflies. Butterflies came a little bit later. Moth camouflage. This is kind of one of the coolest things to talk about. So when we think about moths and butterflies, butterflies are beautiful. Moths we're walking by every day. We're not seeing them. We're kicking them up in the grass. All kinds of things. So when you look at a moth, think about where you might find that moth in the habitat. So this is a yellow-necked caterpillar moth. And at first, when I first read this in a biology book, it's like, oh, they mimic the end of a broken off branch. I was like, that's ridiculous. But the end here looks like it's sheared off from like a dead piece of wood, and then the rest kind of blends in really good. This is a unicorn prominent. Okay? This is a real name. You can Google it. I'm going to go through a bunch of names of moths, and you're going to be like, Mike, you're lying to me. Get out of here. Unicorn prominent. There's a whole group of moths called the prominents, and they get called that because of the way they stick their little hind end up here. And they have these little tufts on top, too. So the unicorn prominent also made to mimic a little broken off stick or branch. Very small. Okay? Rosy maple, obviously. The red maple. This is an AI picture, too. I tried to trick you guys. So, you can create anything nowadays. It wouldn't be that bright, and they usually wouldn't hang out there, but they do tend to hang out near maples. This one is called green lichen, and they blend in very, very well with lichen. And any type of moss or anything that might be on the side of a tree or the ground. And then these are grass ferns. These are some of my favorites because when you're cutting the grass or you're walking through, these guys are so lean and so thin that they just kind of tuck into a little blade of grass nice and smooth. And you often can't see them until you're cutting the grass. And then there's this guy. What does that look like, everybody? You can say it. Bird poop. This is the tufted bird dropping moth. Appropriately named. And there's a whole group of moths that are bird dropping moths that have mimicked the way bird poop looks when it sits on a branch or on a leaf so that they can sneak right by a predator very easily. So pretty smart on their part. Okay? And then there's a variety of different ones too that you often could walk right past. Now, there are other ones, for example, like the IO, that's kind of going around. You're going to wonder, how do they escape predators? They don't. They get eaten pretty quickly, usually. And most of these giant ones, they do stick out like sore thumbs. That's why they only live for about a week, is because with your flying around with this big body and all these big wings, somebody's going to catch you at some point, whether it's a bat, a cat, or me. We're going to go through a few species really quick. And I'm doing this one first because I want to focus on some of the ones that we found and how cool it is to find a rare moth. So we're all familiar with the Isabella tiger, right? Everybody know who their caterpillar is? The woolly bear. This is the woolly bear. So this is what they turn into as an adult. And this is a map of all the records from iNaturalist for like the last 5 years. Okay? So everybody finds them all the time. Anytime anybody sees a woolly bear, I know they're taking a picture of it and they're uploading it to iNaturalist. So thank you, everybody out there who's uploading to iNaturalist. And sometimes I even get them laying eggs on like the side of the house and stuff like that. But for the most part, pretty common. We're all used to this one, right? There are wetland species real quick. I'm going to go back. Wetland species, so they tend to be in wet habitats and often can be found more as their caterpillar stage than as the adults. But I actually tend to run into the adults more. So this one is one of my favorites. Okay, this is the white-tailed diver. So this species blew my mind when I figured this out. So I was making a podcast for an episode about moths, and one of my previous coworkers had said, Mike, do you know that we have a few species of aquatic caterpillars? I was like, what did you just say to me? I was like, how do I not know this? And eventually we figured out that we do have them because I found them like a month later on one of my moth hikes. And right there he was. And what they do is they lay their eggs on the top, and then the caterpillars will eat the top layer of the leaf, so like on an American lotus or a water lily, and they'll just snack on that, and then if there's a predator, they just climb underneath the bottom and hide until the predator goes away. And then they'll go ahead and move on to land where they will pupate and then become their adult form, which is right there. So we have an aquatic caterpillar. Europe has a fully aquatic moth species. So throughout its larval stage and adult stage, the male stays in the water. So it's pretty cool. Unexpected cycnia. So this one was one of the ones that really sparked a kind of a big shift in my brain about how important these little guys were. So this is an endangered species in Ohio. And when I came across it, I was just like, they have there's like 5 or 6 different species of cycnia moths. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, you look a little different than the one I'm familiar with. So I sent it off to some labs and stuff like that for confirmation. Like, well, Mike, we need to do a gene test, and we're not going to pay for that. If you can find the caterpillar, we can confirm this. So I spent like the next week and a half looking for the caterpillar, and eventually did find this little guy right here. So it's awesome that we have these right here, and that people don't even realize how important they are. So when you look, traditionally Ohio, where we live in Ohio, was a prairie type habitat. Obviously with some wetlands in there too, because we live so close to the lake. And once all that got cut down and kind of moved out for different things, or for us as humans growing in population, you started to see a big gap. So historically, this species used to be all throughout Ohio, pretty much up to the Appalachian Plateau that you see right here. Okay? And then over the years, we've seen a decline because these little guys obviously don't have as much habitat in all this space. But we do have some up here, because Toledo MetroParks does a great job at conserving their land as well. And then there's some down here near Dayton as well. It has a really, really big population down into this area. So awesome species that can really kind of make or break a habitat. Okay? And then this one, the brown satire. So this one I found on accident, complete accident. I think it attached itself to me, and then I went inside, because I found this thing in like mid-January, which is weird. So I found the male first, which is right here, and then about a week later I found a female outside. They were both dead already, just on the windowsill there. But this one is really cool too, because this is a really big endangered species. As you can see, there's not many in a lot of places throughout Ohio. So we have someone, well, that's Peely, never mind. I was going to say our islands, but no. So Toledo has a few, there's a few over by Akron, and then Columbus as well. So the issue with this one is there's just not a lot of habitat for them. They like wetland prairies, and you just don't see a lot of that habitat. So they are definitely a struggling species. And then you find ones like this, who don't belong in your area at all, and make you wonder how they got there. So I took this picture in 2020, the first one right here, and as you see, as moths get older, whether it's a week, whether they're 4 days old, however old they are, this one was probably about 2 weeks old, they start to lose a lot of their scales, and they look kind of drab, not as good and fresh as they would look as they just emerged there. But this one right here, it took me like a week and a half to identify this, because I couldn't really find anything that matched it. So I made a couple calls. I have moth friends all over the state of Ohio, and they helped me kind of nail down what we were looking at there. And then about 2 weeks later, I found another one. And I knew it wasn't this one, because this one had some kind of aging to it, and this one did not. So that's a big deal, because most of what we see is all down here. And everybody's like, Mike, does that mean that this species is endangered and threatened? Not necessarily. You want to know what it truly means? Nobody's looking for moths right here. I got to get to these people right there. And that's the truth. Is a lot of people think just because we didn't see it, we saw it when we were a kid, and now we can't find it anymore. It's not always the species kind of declining, because insects can bounce back really quick because they lay a ton of eggs. But this little guy right here, he's kind of out of his element up here. So I haven't seen him in about 3 years. So maybe it was just a one-off, or maybe this species is one that migrates. So there's just more research to be done with certain things too. And this is the moth that started everything, right here. So this one right here, the pink streak. So when I found this one, I couldn't ID it. So I sent it off to a couple people, and they identified it for me, and then they're like, hey, did that thing die on your porch by any chance, or when you found it, because it looks pretty old here? I said, actually it did, and I collected the specimen. And they're like, okay, well, you should send it to Ohio State. So that's what I did. If you have some good, if you follow their rules, which is you have to follow the rules with how you are pinning and presenting insects for them, but they will accept a variety of insects too, if they're collected properly and whatnot. But I was able to send this one to Ohio State, and it's still there. So it's a cool one. This one's another one that is a grassland species they eat a very specific type of grass, switchgrass. So when you know what they eat and you figure it out, you can be like, okay, if we know where that plant's at and we know what we're looking for, we can better protect these little guys. And they're kind of cute looking. This is another one called the Newman's brocade. I was actually fortunate enough to find like 8 of these within like 2 years. So this was a threatened species as well that has, as you can see, kind of has a little bit spread out distribution. And I should have told you guys this before. These are 2 different types of maps. So these green ones are usually from iNaturalist, and these are from Pomona, butterflies and moths of North America. So some people, some lepidopterists like to only use Pomona, and some are just fine with using iNaturalist. I like to use both. So, and then here's another weird name that's going to throw you guys off. Okay, so these are pyrustas. Okay, not to be confused with roosters. But this is the mint-loving pyrusta. This is the coffee-loving pyrusta. Okay, so what's his favorite meal? No, believe it or not, it's not it. The biologist, I got bones to pick with some old biologists. That's what I have about how they name things. So the reason that it got named the coffee-loving pyrusta is because the first person that found it near a coffee plant. So like, oh. And it was found in like Mexico, I believe. But as you can see, not a ton of these in Ohio either. So very, very limited distribution. And you're probably wondering why. Well, when these little grubs and larvae, they can easily get on plants, different materials. We are constantly shipping things all across the country, are we not? I've bought plants from other states before and they get shipped in. And those caterpillars can easily come in that way. So that's things we don't often think of. And you don't often know where the plants that you bought from the nursery down the street came from. So when we think about that, it's not unheard of to find rarities from time to time that don't belong in that habitat. And then I'm going to share with you guys some weird names and some of my favorites, okay? So somebody asked about migrating moths. I have been chasing this moth for 7 years. This is the black witch, okay? And they migrate a pretty good distance, usually from southern U.S. up into Canada a little bit. I got a call about one, and I missed it by like 40 minutes. So that stinks, but I'll get there, and you'll all hear about it. So the hummingbird moths, I did this one because they're so cool, and they often get kind of confused with other insects from time to time. So they're a species of clearwing. So as you can see, they have these transparent wings. They also have these phenomenal mouth parts called proboscis. So it's like a giant straw. And this was one of the species that helped biologists realize that moths are better and more efficient pollinators than butterflies. Okay? And the reason why is because most butterflies, when they go up to a plant, what do they have to do? They have to land on it. These guys do not. They hover. In some cases. Sometimes they'll land, but they can hover at the plant. So they can go in, stick that proboscis in, pull it back out, move on to the next plant. Not wasting any time. Okay? And not having to worry about predators, like spiders and things that might be sitting on that plant.
Are they as fast flyers as a hummingbird?
Not as fast, but they have that same figure 8 motion, but they're pretty quick.
And they're really loud too when they're high, because when I found one, I thought, what the heck is that noise?
Yeah, it's because that, instead of that straight up and down wing beat, it's kind of going like this, so they're clacking together. But they do look like hummingbirds as well. So like every time I see one, I'm like, oh. And then you gotta look a little longer, and you're like, okay, try to track
Are they about that big?
They're a little smaller, just ever so slightly
I think I've
smaller.
seen one.
You probably have.
Yeah.
Or even mistaken it for a hummingbird. Okay? This one, my favorite name, this is my band name if I ever start a band, Grape Leaf Skeletonizer. One of my favorites. Nobody can take that band name. And then we don't have these in this part of the U.S. Oh, actually, these are in Europe. But there is one called the vampire moth, and they do suck blood. Okay? Believe it or not, that is him taking his proboscis and sticking it into a gentleman's finger. Okay? So, we do have one species in the world that is a bloodsucker. Believe it or not. And they believe that this happened from their proboscis is extremely strong because there's a lot of hard fruit that they used to kind of shoot their proboscis into so they could suck nutrients out of. And then, at some point, a biologist got stuck in the finger, and the moth stayed there for like 10 minutes. So he's like, what is it doing? Why is it doing this? And then another biologist came in and kind of figured out that he is collecting salt or sodium so that he can pass it off to the female when they mate, so that it can help the eggs as they grow. So pretty cool, a little scary. You don't have to worry about them here. You're good. Okay. And then we have invasive moths as well. And I always like to touch on these because you'll see these and they look cool. They do. They look really cool. And they're beautiful, but they're displacing native species and they don't have a lot of predators to eat them. So it can create a little bit of an issue for them. So this one down here is the box tree. This one's a new one that we're starting to see in a little bit of areas, but it's not really the moth that's the issue, it's the caterpillar for these guys. They have no discretion, they'll eat whatever, they don't really care. And then the spongy moth, which we've had for a long time, formerly known as the gypsy moth. These guys do not really have a lot of predators. These spines right here can be a little irritating for predators, so most things just try to avoid them.
Question.
Yes?
What is the behavior called if you see a group of caterpillars and you walk near them and they kind of move and flare
Yeah, they'll flick it back and
all
forth.
at once?
Remember I said they're super sensitive? So it's not only to temperature, but to sound. So if you go over to, like, if you see tent caterpillars, for example, they're easy to spot. You start clicking, they'll start whipping their heads back and forth to the sound, okay? Because they can feel the vibration. So, and then sometimes you'll see caterpillars in a group, like a catalpa sphinx caterpillar. They usually eat next to each other, and if another one touches them, they'll start like waving back and forth to create space so they can eat. So.
These kind of have a way of flaring, like, don't come near me.
Well, there are
all
some.
of them at once.
Oh, interesting.
Only seen it once in my life.
Oh. Well, if you see it again, take a picture. There are some species that have spines as caterpillars as well that can kind of hurt a little bit. So the IO, so the yellow one that you saw right there, I accidentally raised a whole, like 40 of them. It was a complete accident. They got onto one of my moth sheets, and then I went home, and then they hatched on it, and I felt bad, so I kept them. But I didn't want to because it's a lot of work to take care of caterpillars. But they have spines as caterpillars, and if you touch them, actually this is what my grandma told me when I was a kid. She said, you want to know how the IOs got their name? Because when you touch your caterpillars, you go, IO! Because it hurts. So they're pretty interesting too. And then there's a few other species, this eastern saddleback, that if you touch it, it's going to give you some pretty good irritation on your fingers as well, or anywhere it touches you. All right? So, how can you get involved? It's pretty simple. First thing, citizen science, which goes right into the iNaturalist thing. If you haven't used iNaturalist or Seek, I should have put that in here, I would advise doing it if you love nature and you love wildlife and the environment, because citizen science, and I think I didn't realize this because I'm an education background more than a biologist background. I didn't realize how important the tiny little pictures that I'm taking is to helping biologists. I've had so many cool interactions with biologists on iNaturalist. I've had people reach out to me for seeds, for seed banks, for caterpillar specimens, for moth specimens that I found. So, you know, any work that's getting done with iNaturalist, and obviously everything's not perfect, but we're helping biologists a lot by kind of contributing there in that citizen science way. Caterpillar count, that's another really cool one. So you're counting caterpillar species early in spring to kind of see what the population is, kind of a prediction of what the population will be. And it's pretty fun to do too, a little time consuming. Butterflies and moths of North America, they're awesome as a great resource as well. National Moth Week is huge, especially this week. So if you're seeing anything, even if you don't want to start an iNaturalist, just send it over to me. I have business cards, and I'll be more than happy to upload your stuff and help you guys out with kind of getting things started. And then set up in your own backyard for wildlife. What I mean when I say that, if you've seen Ned the Naturalist's pollinator garden out here, I'm not gonna lie, his blazing star is looking good out here. He's got all kinds of great plants. Things like that, simple things like that. Even if you're in downtown Sandusky, downtown Portland, it doesn't matter. A little bit of wildlife, a little bit of pollinator habitat is going to go a long way for not just pollinators, but for other things in the community too. So.
I added native plants to my home in Catawba, and from the time we were there till like 8 years we've been there now, I mean, it's amazing the number of pollinators that I have just from a handful of plants. So it starts with one plant. Yep. Don't think you have to plant a field of pollinator plants.
Yeah, you don't have to have 10 acres. You don't have to, and there's a lot of kind of information out there about how you can get started with kind of simple things, and check out programming in your area with local park districts and stuff. There's all kinds of good things. And then volunteering with your local park or conservation group. And why that's important is because even myself, I'm not an expert at everything. I'm good at a few things. But when you work with experts and you work with people who are knowledgeable, it gives you confidence, and it gives them confidence that what they're doing is helping the community and helping the environment. So paying attention to those kind of things are all awesome. All right, any questions? Yes?
Okay, so well, the ones that are like endangered or whatever, what habitat do they need that we don't have anymore?
So when you think about kind of habitat and why or why not you have a species, the first thing you have to figure out is what that moth species or caterpillar is eating. So when moths tend to be generalists, they tend to, well, anything tends to be a generalist, tends to fare better, has a lot of variety of food choices. As I mentioned, that pink streak moth, they feed on like 2 species of switchgrass. So if the switchgrass is gone, moth's going to disappear too. So making sure to find the balance of where, like, okay, you can help the moth a little bit, but if it doesn't expand its food preferences, it's going to be in trouble. So the truth is you really have to kind of look at it from a species to species, kind of through a different lens, and kind of see it that way, more than try to be like, okay, can we fix the entire habitat? Because if you go in and wipe out a habitat, you're going to get rid of something that was there to try to bring back an endangered one. It's not worth killing 10 other species in that habitat to just bring back one. But it does show us that if we're looking a little bit harder, we can find those species, even in weird places that you wouldn't expect. So, any other questions?
There was one that looked like the spotted lanternfly. Maybe not.
Right.
In one of your specimen cases.
Oh, in the specimen case. Was it this one?
I don't remember. No.
No, I think it was one of the last 2 that came
Yeah.
by.
Oh, okay. This one?
I think so. I don't
Well,
remember.
the one, this,
It was in one of them.
Oh, so this is the giant leopard moth. That one.
Maybe it was that one. I
So-
don't know. I think it was more in like the bottom corner. Anyway, nonetheless.
Well, that one's the Virginian tiger moth. So they do kind of look, especially once they open up those underwings, and you can see the red under there.
Yeah.
That also kind of shows you, but if you don't know, don't squish it. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. If you're not sure, don't squish it. But if you're sure it's a lambda-fly, squish that thing. So a variety of these different ones can, so when we're talking about the giant leopard moth, this one's really cool. You might not be able to see it because they kind of fade away in time, but if you look, they have these 3 or 4 little blue spots on top of their head. Cool. And if you find them while they're alive and you go up and just go, boop, like that, they'll secrete this like yellowish substance, and it's like freaks you out a little bit. You're like, oh, I killed him. His juices are coming out. Yes, you see the little blue spots there? They'll secrete this little substance, and this substance makes them taste awful. So hopefully predators will put it in their mouth and like, get it out of here. But it's weird that it comes, a lot of people think it comes from their head, but it comes from like their neck and their thorax. It's like in between there. All right, any other questions?
When are your moth walks?
Ooh, I did one last night, and I have one tomorrow from 9:30 to 11 at Hoffman Forest Metro Park in Berlin Heights. Okay, so I'm hoping to find some good stuff there, because I haven't been there in a couple of years, for mothing, that is. I have business cards up here, I have stickers. If you guys have any questions about moths, or you find something cool, or you start mothing in your own backyard, you want to tell me about it, please do. Please do.
Do we have any online? No. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was amazing. And thank you all for coming. We'll have another Net Talk. I believe it's August 21st. And that will actually be Jana Wilson, who you all saw speaking about the Parks District, and she's going to be talking about how to get yourself out into nature and do it without, getting ticks all over you. So, good advice for just getting out into the parks, and also talking about some of the parks that the Parks District has and some of their plans for the future. So, thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Great information. I now know much more about moths. It's awesome. Thanks, everyone.
More than you ever cared to know.
No.
And mine.